Hello, curious people. My name is Sarah, and I'm a professional software engineer and artist, and I've got a lot of work to do before my next market coming up, KaiCon February, and I thought I would take you along for the process that has been much requested of how I make my DIY foil notebook covers. I've had these at my last couple of events, and I really love making them, at least now that I have a bit more of a process, so I make fewer mistakes. So let me show you through all of the steps, as well as the tools and materials that I use. So we'll go through designing, cutting, weeding, pressing, and peeling. So let's jump over into tools and materials. The first material is actually HTV, or heat transfer vinyl. You can use any HTV that you like, whatever brand's accessible to you. This is just a random no-name brand that I get online. You can just get any HTV that's local to you at your local craft and art supply stores. Next, and probably most important, is the notebooks. So you'll need some kind of notebook to press your design onto. I also have like a no-name brand for these, and they're also not available anymore because they keep running out of stock. You can use any notebook you like. You can buy them from any sort of stationery store, or you can buy something cheap from something like Daiso or Kmart if you want. In my case, I spent a lot of time sourcing higher quality blanks to press my notebooks on because I wanted to sell these at my artist markets as like a high quality product. But you can use whatever you like. You can even hand make your own notebooks and then press the foil onto those instead. You'll also need some kind of heat press to apply the HTV, as it's in the name, heat transfer vinyl. I use the HTV front press. This is just a standard HTV press that I got on Amazon in Australia. I'll link it down below. It's a little bit more expensive than using a household iron, which is the alternative here, but being able to control the temperature and having the timers set on it so you know exactly how long you're pressing it for makes a world of difference in getting a clean application, because if you're not pressing consistently, you're going to have a really hard time figuring out where your issues are coming from and how to troubleshoot them. Now for my HTV designs, I also use my cutting machine to cut the material digitally using Silhouette Studio and the Cameo 3. You could also prepare HTV by hand by using an X-Acto knife very carefully along the vinyl, but obviously in my case I want to make a couple of notebooks with the same design. For me, a cutting machine works well. You'll also need some kind of weeding tools to pull off the bits of vinyl that you don't want to apply. I just have a very basic Cricut set that I think I bought from Spotlight ages ago, but you can buy any cheap set that you want, as long as it has a pointy bit to help grab onto those bits of vinyl. If you're using a cutting machine, you're also going to want a nice big roll of masking tape to stop the vinyl from curling up. And also a good old pair of snippy snips would go a long way. So all of my notebook cover designs start with thumbnail sketches in my sketchbook, and then I move on to Clip Studio Paint or Photoshop to create clean versions of the designs that I would use for the cut files. You can design them in whatever way you want, and I know Procreate has some of the features that I'm about to show you in Clip Studio Paint, such as the symmetry tools that can make your life a lot easier when designing something a bit more graphical like this. So as I mentioned, I like to use the ruler symmetry tools in Clip Studio when I'm designing some of the notebook covers, because I want to draw various symmetrical elements so it has that very arranged look to the design. But after I finish the design, I do typically like to take it into Photoshop just to clean things up or tweak some things. You want to make sure that no part of your design is any smaller than about 2mm, because I've found that that's the threshold for bits of the HTV not wanting to adhere properly to the notebook or not wanting to be weeded correctly or cut accurately by the machine. But once you're done with your design, you just want to export a transparent PNG from whatever software you are using, and we're going to drop that straight into Silhouette Studio. Now we're at that point where we're going to actually want to print a scale test of our notebook cover design. So you're going to need to pop a sheet of paper in the printer and print out your design at the scale that you're intending to cut it, and trim that down and make sure that it looks like it fits okay on the cover of your notebook, which hopefully you've already measured, but if you haven't, now's the time to go and do that. Once you're happy with the scale of your design, head back over to Silhouette Studio and make sure that your design is flipped. If your design is not flipped, you will end up with your design mirrored the wrong way when you go to transfer it, because you cut the opposite side of the HTV to the way that you apply it. I'll demonstrate this when we actually get to the pressing part of this video, but just for now, make sure that you select the option to mirror your design horizontally before you set your design onto cut. Okay, let's move on to cutting the vinyl. So I use a paper trimmer to cut the vinyl just because it helps me get a straight edge, but you can just take a pair of scissors to it if you like. Once you cut your vinyl down to size for your file, you'll just want to lay it on your cutting mat and make sure it's on the straight, especially if you've got parts of your design that go quite far to the edges of your 12-inch space. And here's where I tape it down with masking tape as well to make sure that it doesn't curl up during the cutting process. Once you're done, load it all up into the cutting machine and make sure that the mat gets fed in straight, because you're not using any registration marks here, and it's relying entirely on how accurately you're loading the cutting mat in to where it's going to cut. Otherwise you might end up cutting through the cutting mat instead of the material. My cut settings look like this. For HTV, for a kiss cut, I use a blade 1 with a force 8 and a speed 8 and just one pass because it doesn't need to be a particularly deep cut. It is fairly flexible on these settings here because the backing of the HTV, the transfer sheet that's adhesive, is actually pretty thick and sturdy, so even if you do cut a little bit too hard, it's going to take a lot of force to accidentally cut the whole way through the backing for this, unlike a regular vinyl. So cut settings set, and away we go. If you've got a very intricate design, it could take a while to cut. In my case, I think it takes about maybe 6 minutes all up for this design, but for my other one that's very intricate, it takes quite a long time, and depending on how you've designed your file, it could also take quite some time to weed as well, which we'll get into, I guess, now. So let's move on to weeding the design. So you just want to grab your weeding tools and work in whatever way comes most naturally to you, but the HTV that I use is quite stretchy, which makes it super easy to weed, at least for this design. So all you got to do is kind of get in there and start peeling it up, and it should be pretty tear resistant as long as your cuts are nice and clean. My other design, I have like a sword design for another notebook cover, and that one takes me about 1,000,000 years to weed because it was my first design and I made the mistake of making all of these enclosed spaces that require you to get in there with the weeding tool and pull all of each individual little bits out, and it takes a very long time to weed. This one only takes a couple of minutes, which is much, much better, but the other one took me anywhere from like 20 to 40 minutes per sheet, so per notebook cover. Just make sure that you factor that in to the pricing if you are making these notebooks to sell. Just take your time and be patient, and before you know it, the design will be completely weeded and looking absolutely gorgeous. So let's move everything over and get set up for the pressing. So I'm going to plug in my heat press and let it warm up, and while it's doing that, I'm actually going to grab a couple sheets of cardstock and put them underneath the cover of the notebooks. I'm not going to jam it in all the way up to the spine, but by putting this inside the cover, it really helps give a firm surface for the pressure to apply to when I press down with the heat press. So for my machine, I use 150 degrees, and I'm not sure what the American conversions are, so I'll put it up on screen what my settings are. But in addition to that, I set the timer for 20 seconds, and when I go to press the notebooks, I press on the horizontal sides for 10 seconds because the screen will show me how long I've been pressing for, and then at a 10-second mark, I'll move my hands to the corner of the notebook and press the other 10 seconds from a different side just to try to distribute that pressure and get it evenly across the whole notebook cover. And the screen gives me a reading for the pressure. I keep it around 20 to 30 points, but you will have to experiment for yourself because the different kinds of materials you might be using for your notebook covers may react differently to the amount of heat and time and pressure, but hopefully this gives you somewhere to work from. Once you've completed the press, you just want to safely put your heat press to the side and let the notebook start to cool on the top. Now, you don't want to wait too long, only about a minute or so. Once it's only sort of warm to the touch, it's not uncomfortable to touch anymore, you'll want to start the peel. If you wait until it's cold to peel, the HTV will try to come up with the adhesive as you peel it, and you'll have a harder time getting it to adhere properly. So I recommend you doing a nice warm peel, at least with this particular material, and it should come off nice and cleanly and give you a really polished, finished look. So I'll show you this here. This is a sample from a manufacturer that I actually contacted recently. I've been looking to get my sword design outsourced because I'm no longer able to source my blanks. You'll see that some of the biggest differences between the HTV cover and the hot stamped foil cover is that it's much harder to get finer details on the hot stamp because of the very traditional metal plate method used. But it really does have quite a fabulous finished look with that debossed engraved effect. I'll talk a bit more about those in the future maybe when my big batch actually arrives from the manufacturer, and hopefully I can do a bit of an unboxing here for you guys. So let's cover quickly some tips and tricks that I want to mention before we close out this video, as well as some things to avoid. So I do want to say that if you are using an iron, make sure that you start with a lower temperature setting and work your way up using test scraps of material, because I put a giant iron print into one of the first notebooks that I tried to press. It was like this hideous big burn mark because I was struggling to get the HTV to adhere, and so I cranked up the temperature and then I pressed really hard, and it basically just branding stamped the entire cover of the notebook instead of transferring the foil. I do really recommend an HTV press, but if you can't get one, definitely work slow and low with an iron till you get your settings right. The next tip I want to offer is that if you see your design cracking, creating a lot of texture across the surface, then you might want to consider that maybe your heat is too high or your pressing time is too long, because if you press for too long, the HTV will start to crack and the glue may become inactive and not actually want to adhere properly to the surface anymore. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll actually be working on putting out a couple of different YouTube videos. So I'm actually working on paint with me style videos. So I've got a lot of footage of one of my latest big paintings. I'll put a picture up of it here and I'll show you the full process of that, including a lot of real-time footage and some time-lapse footage. and we'll probably have a chat about some other art related topic during that video. And I'm also going to be looking at putting together a full sticker sheet tutorial with more in-depth instructions from start to finish in Silhouette Studio of how I set up my cut lines as well as how I design my files. And if we're lucky, I might even put together a little Artist Alley vlog of my time at KaiCon that's coming up this weekend at February 8th and February 9th in the Melbourne Convention Exhibition Centre. It's going to be a great time, but hopefully you can look forward to some of that. Let me know if you do have any ideas for some future video topics and I will see what I can do. I hope this was helpful, and let's go have a look at the final result of these notebooks and just how incredibly gorgeous they are. This process has taken me a lot of trial and error, and I really had wished that there had been some YouTube resources when I was looking into this 6 months ago. So I really hope that this is helpful for you if you want to start doing your own foil covered notebooks, whether that's for yourself or for gifts or for selling in your own artist markets. Let me know if you do end up using this technique. I would love to see what kind of notebooks you make, because that would be fantastic to see. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if I've forgotten anything. I'll make sure to link as much of the stuff as I can below, aside from the things that are obviously sold out and you can't get anymore. And thank you so much to everybody who left lovely comments on my last video. It really made my day. Absolutely, it made a whole week, honestly. I really wasn't expecting quite that many people to see the video, so it was a little bit surprising, but I'm happy nonetheless. So thank you for sticking around, and hopefully you'll look forward to some of the aforementioned videos, and hopefully I'll see you soon.